Welcome to the Guide to Movies podcast with Joe and Sean. This is the 24th episode with Sean on board. And today is December 1st, and we have a fantastic guest here who we'll get to in just a second. But Sean, how are you?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. This week I'm in the middle of a 5-day cleanse, and it's just great because for breakfast the past 2 days I've had green juice, and so looking forward to having more green juice as we go. I'm feeling both healthy and hungry. Actually, no, just kidding, just hungry. But that's about it for me.
Why do I feel like this is your fiance's doing?
Well, I didn't exactly think it up. No, I mean, I will say she did not force me into this. I will say that, like, she said, "Hey, I'm doing this. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Oh, 5 days. I could probably pull it off." And around 12 hours, I was like, "I can't pull this off." But I'm still going strong. A day and a half in, so yeah. No,
there you go.
Okay.
There you go. And of course, our guest tonight, Rachel's Reviews. Welcome to the podcast for the first time.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Very happy to pull you away from your 150 movie Hallmark binge. We'll give you a little break from that tonight. How have things been for you?
They have been good. We finished covering the Christmas movie bonanza that is Thanksgiving week. Literally, I did my last podcast covering that today. And so that's about 25 movies that we covered and reviewed on the podcast and I wasn't on every single one of those, but I was on most of them. And so it's an intense epic journey of Hallmark coverage at the Hallmark podcast.
That it certainly is. Did you see that the star of the film that you and I both liked and talked about on your podcast, on the Hallmarkies podcast, Jonathan Bennett, got engaged?
Yes, that was so exciting. So cute.
The headlines are really funny, though, because they keep saying that he ugly cried through his engagement, through the proposal, and everyone, his fiance was like, "It's true."
Yeah. Be like, who wouldn't? I would expect nothing less from our Hallmark leading man.
Right. All right. Well, hey, we always start off, Rachel, with what we've been watching and just give a little, highlights of some of the things we've been blessing our screens with in this quarantine streaming environment. So I'm going to touch on these real quick. I'll first start off with Half Brothers, film I saw a few weeks ago. Essentially, a father is dying. He's on his deathbed. He's very into games and scavenger hunts. When his son, who he has a strained relationship with, returns from Mexico to go to his father's side, he finds out that there is a half brother, and they are sent on a journey together to kind of uncover some of the secrets of their father's life. Good. It's a decent movie in terms of it's a buddy feel good film. It didn't really strike all the right chords with me, so wasn't too thrilled with that. Also watched Happiest Season, which was on Hulu. Very happy to see LGBTQIA representation in a rom-com like that and really dealing with the coming out process. I do feel like they had a few missteps in how they handled that. I didn't find many of the characters likable and think that Dan Levy and Aubrey Plaza are phenomenal in the movie in the limited capacities, especially Aubrey Plaza. I really enjoyed her in that film. And Dan Levy, he could say anything and I'll giggle. He's so funny. The last one was Super Intelligence, which is the latest Melissa McCarthy film that went straight to HBO Max and was directed by her husband. My message to Melissa McCarthy is to stop starring in vehicles in which her husband is the director. And I just don't feel like those movies play to her strengths. This is another example of a pretty weak script, and the ending or the climax was kind of anticlimactic in a lot of ways. It kind of just happens. But I did see today that there is going to be a series that her husband is producing, and she is going to be in that. So she didn't get my memo. But I love her. I just want better for her. I fear that with her comedic career, she's going to start turning into kind of like the Adam Sandler of comedy. Like he did all those films that weren't really well received. We'll say that. But anyway, Sean, you didn't get a chance to watch anything based on this list of 37 movies.
Yeah, only a couple of teens worth of them. So I'll just like breeze through these very quickly. Last night I just wanted to watch a good old classic movie. I haven't watched an old movie in a while that I've never seen, and so I watched After Hours, a Scorsese picture. Really fun comedy. It's literally like the last generation's uncut gems, where the main character has quite a to-do list to accomplish, and it's just like you're stressed, but you're also laughing at how ridiculous it is. I watched Miracle on 34th Street and cried twice, and so that went very well.
Which Miracle on 34th Street?
Oh, it's a shame that I have to, identify that there was a remake. And I understand that some people like the remake, so I won't even go too far there. But the 1947 version, it is, just an absolutely beautiful, perfect holiday picture. I also watched Super Intelligence. Speaking of perfect, this is the opposite. I also watched Hillbilly Elegy. And this was one that decided not to have teeth to it. It was a political movie without any teeth. They took the teeth out. They made it a human interest thing. If they put the politics in there, it also wouldn't have been that great. Pardon me. It also wouldn't have been that great. But I would have not agreed with the politics level of it. But it is interesting that they decided to make it very boring and just sort of like very. I said toothless already. It just was very toothless, and it just sort of like bothered me that it didn't decide to like take a stand, even one that I wouldn't, and a lot of people wouldn't agree with. That's as like generic as I can go with that. I showed Sam Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for the first time. She loved it just as much as I did, and so she passed that humanity test because I absolutely love that movie. And then finally, or not finally, because I'm going to talk about the big one, but I also watched The Personal History of David Copperfield, and I absolutely adored this movie, and my review still hasn't come out yet. Joe, I'm very curious, because I remember you were not a fan, and we could do this another time, but I just think maybe was it the period piece thing? Was it the Armando Iannucci thing?
Yeah, I think what I'm learning is that I'm not a huge fan of period pieces. And that's kind of a trend that I'm seeing in films. So I try to give them all an opportunity, but I think it's just not my thing. And I didn't really, I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it.
It's totally okay, but I was just so surprised that because we usually line up. And the mainstream one I'm going to talk about is The Happiest Season. And I truly, I'm about to say it weird. I truly, madly, deeply liked this movie. I think it's just a very pleasant holiday movie. I think it's wonderful. I have issues with the writing structure of it. I think that it tried to be too different. Oh no. Okay. I tried to be too different. In like the comedies that it was trying to like sort of accomplish. Like sometimes it was a hijinks comedy, sometimes a human comedy. I think that I agree with you, Joe, that some of the characters were extremely unpleasant, also awful at times, and acted quite terrible. I think you see the basis between them and how awful. The reasons why does not excuse it, but it does help understand it. I think this probably is and probably will be one of the best casts of the year. It's just, talent on talent on talent, including absolute all-star Dan Levy and Aubrey Plaza, that were just unbelievable. I think Mary Steenburgen is also quite great in it. And so that was all of the ones that I was looking at this week.
Excellent. And now, Rachel,
Yes.
Have you been able to catch anything else other than your Hallmark films?
Yeah, I actually have. I wanted to say I really loved Personal History of David Copperfield, so I'm totally with you on. I thought it brought almost like a Wes Anderson-y kind of feel to a period piece. So I actually thought, this might be one that people that don't normally like period pieces might like because it had like a little bit of a different feel. But I don't know. I just thought it was so good. And I loved Dev Patel, and I just thought it was funny and interesting and really, really good. I mean, it's hard because it's such a long novel to compress it all into a movie, but it's one of my favorites of the year, actually. Hillbilly Elegy, I did not like at all. I just felt like, why are we wallowing in these people's miserable lives? What is the point? What are we supposed to learn from these people? And if anybody who knows me knows I absolutely hated the movie The Glass Castle. I thought that movie was just repugnant on every level. I hated it. Me and Sean Chandler had a big kind of war of words about it. He loved it. I hated it. And I just thought, how dare they celebrate this evil, horrible man, and they're toasting him at the end of the movie. It really made me mad. This movie at least acknowledges the fact that these people are terrible. So I at least give it that credit, but it's just like, what's the point? What are we supposed to learn from watching these selfish, self-involved, miserable human beings for 2 hours? I don't understand. And I certainly wasn't that compelled by the lead character, who was just kind of annoying. And I don't know, I just really, really disliked it. It actually took me 2 days to watch because I was just like, and I grew up in a small town in Maryland, and so I feel like I have some understanding that I served my mission in Indiana. So anyway, I really disliked it. If you want to see something that's much better, watch the movie Minari, which is coming out from A24 this month. It's a little bit of a slow burn, but talk about having the cutest kids to ever exist. They are both the girl and the boy are so cute. And it's just about how his father tries to make a goal of it, farming in Iowa or someplace like that. I forget where it is, somewhere in the Midwest. And he's a Korean immigrant, his father and mother. And so that one's really good. Croods of the New Age, I enjoyed. I was a little nervous at first because I thought, oh no, they're going to make this a love triangle story, but they didn't, and they actually made the girls become friends, and I was like, yes, way to go. And beautiful animation. I don't like it as much as the original, but I think I like the original more than most. So there you go. It was a little shouty for me at times. I was just like, we need just some calm moments. Everybody's like, all the time. And I don't like that. I don't like that animation, but it was still. I actually saw it on Thanksgiving morning at the IMAX. I was one of the people in the so that was interesting. I also saw Pixar's new entry, Soul. I think that this is going to be a movie that a lot of people love, and then a lot of people are kind of like, no. I don't think anybody will like hate it. It's too bold and ambitious to hate, but it's really not very kid friendly. And so I think that'll be a big test of how kind of palatable you find it. Because like, at least with Inside Out, you had Riley as a little girl that like kids can relate to. And this is about a grown man, Joe, who's having this existential problem. And the animation is absolutely stunning, and I loved the music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. So good. It's definitely a good movie. I'm still sort of working it over in my brain as far as my Pixar ranking of it. I don't know. It's a very weird movie, and I think when you watch it, think of it as you're watching an art house film, not a blockbuster. And I think you'll appreciate it more if you have that attitude. The Happiest Season, I did go fresh on it on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it has its heart in the right place. I think it's funny enough to enjoy, and it's nice to get that representation. But I do agree that Harper's character is extremely unlikable, and I think that that's what she is asking her girlfriend to do is incredibly mean and horrible. And I think that it would have worked better if she was a younger character, because I think it makes sense, somebody not coming out and asking that kind of thing for somebody that's 18, 19, that kind of thing. But when you're in your 30s, you need to be a grown up and not ask your partner to do that kind of thing, and not deny your partner in front of everybody that you know. That's just really bad. But it made me laugh enough. I still enjoyed it. So there we go.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting movie. One of my friends tweeted, and it was actually really funny. It made me laugh that they were going to buy an Uber to send. Oh my gosh, names are escaping me tonight. Kristen. I'm sorry, I forget her name.
Stewart.
Yes, thank you, Kristen Stewart, to send her an Uber to take her away with Aubrey Plaza or something like that, because those two had such better chemistry.
I'd agree with that. I think that they did have, I think, better chemistry between the two.
Yeah. It's a
But
shame.
I liked the younger sister and her sort of escaping into Middle Earth to survive in this family.
One of the things I laughed at the most, and this is the cheesiest line in the movie, but at the end, when Dan Levy's sitting there and they're at a book signing, and that doesn't really give much away, but someone comes up with 2 books and goes, "Oh, 2, it's an onslaught," or something like that. And it was just a throwaway joke that only he can deliver. And it was kind of, it harkened back to Schitt's Creek, but it was so funny.
I also thought Mary Steenburgen was pretty funny in her role. I thought she did a good job.
It was definitely it was a good movie. I'm excited. I was reading an article earlier that Clea Duvall, who wrote and co-wrote and directed, has sequel hopes. So that'll be interesting because I don't know where they go with that, but we'll see. All right.
Yeah, I was surprised because it has such a pedigree of LGBTQ involvement in directing, writing, everything like that. There were a few things that I was like, "Oh, are we still doing that?"
Right.
Because I remember in Sweet Home Alabama, that's like, I think 2002 or something like that. There's a moment where Reese Witherspoon outs her friend in front of the whole town. And I remember when it came out, I didn't give it much thought. And now it seems like such a shocking moment. I'm like, I can't believe they did that and have it in. And then I watched Happy Season. I'm like, oh, we're still doing that. Okay.
Sean, what were you going to say?
Sorry.
I can't quite remember now, but I'll just go off of that. But just what Allison Brie did there was unforgivable. I mean, that was one of the moments where it's like, oh, there's sibling rivalry, and then there's what just happened, and of her just in front of not just the family, but in front of a large amount of family friends, and so that is literally outing your daughter to everybody. And so that was just this kind of scary moment where, she's responsible for some fantastic gift baskets. Oh, no, sorry. Gift experiences that are put into wood crated vessels. But it was just something where I just couldn't believe that, that kind of character, would pull something like that. And you're right. It seems a little bit aged.
And just a heads up, we are having, it looks like, some streaming issues here and there. So if we talk over one another or whatnot, we'll correct that in the editing. But we're going to go off on a tangent here with Happiest Season, because one other thing that I didn't realize until after, and I want your perspective on this, both of you, that there's not much of a diverse cast outside of the LGBTQIA community. So especially when you're talking about individuals of color, of course, there is the brother-in-law who has maybe 4 lines in the movie, and then there are the kids. But outside of that, it's not a very diverse movie.
I don't think it was able to be, considering that most of the cast was a family of probably, just completely just milquetoast white. Now, you could have had Kristen Stewart's character be a character of color, Dan Levy's character be a character of color, and then we wouldn't have had Kristen Stewart and Dan Levy, which is not to say that we should not have diverse cast because of that. But that was just something where I think it was because what's the right word? It was something that bothered me. I noticed it as well when I saw the poster. I was like, oh boy, yeah, this is not great. But it's just, I believe that because we're in that suburban town, it's just they're trying to create an image of something that was less inclusive, I would almost argue. And that's exactly what that family was all about, was less inclusivity. Obviously, because they're talking.
That in the world of 2020, the depiction of sort of the conservative family in Midwest America has a mixed race marriage.
Yeah,
that's something we wouldn't have seen not that long ago. It's kind of interesting, I thought.
That actually was fascinating. And actually, that's one of the things I realized. I forgot to make this point in my review, but the politics in this were rather aged. I mean, Victor Garber's running for mayor. I think he would be kind of psyched to have a lesbian daughter in there, and he would bring her to every single event and say hey, look at this. Yeah. Because and it would be disgusting, but that's something that I feel like, I couldn't help but think that unless of course he's running in a very, very conservative area, which might have been the case. I might be naive in my blue state, but that was just something I thought of as well.
It's definitely. Yeah. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, I mean, I definitely don't think it would be a problem. I
Mhm.
mean, I live in Utah, pretty red state, and I don't think it would be a problem.
Yeah.
I really don't. Like your children, like what? You don't have control
Yeah.
over their choices. Like, so even people that
Like,
had an issue with it, which would be stupid, of course, but if they did, it's not. He has no control over that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
so.
It's an interesting piece of that. I think I see both sides. I do wish that there would have been a little bit more meat given to the characters that were racially diverse in there, instead of just kind of, checking a box and having a few in. There's opportunities even with, thinking about the two drag queens that were in it. There's an opportunity there to, pick a drag queen of color. And, Aubrey Plaza's character really, I guess, could have been as well as the family friend and all
Yes.
that. But interesting. So we'll see. I'm interested to see where they go with the sequel. If they do, I do think that there will be people pushing for that, because it's a movie that's been well received generally, and Hulu is happy to have that. Let's start talking about some of the movie news. We don't have too much to cover tonight, but some good stories here, I think. The first is an interesting story about who may play Barack Obama in a future biopic, which is inevitable. But the story goes back to 2010, when Drake made the comment that he is good at impressions and has been practicing how to kind of embody Barack Obama's speaking style. And that he pays attention just so that if he ever gets the call, he's ready to go. And fast forward, of course, President Obama this year was on a new or a 360 with Speedy Mormon is what the show was called. And he said, Drake seems to be able to do whatever he wants. I mean, that is a talented brother. So if the time comes and he's ready. And then when they asked him a little more specifically, if he gives him the green light to play him, he said, more importantly, I think he gets my household stamp of approval. I suspect Malia and Sasha would be just fine with that, which I thought was pretty cute. But can we see Drake as Barack Obama? Rachel, I'll start down with you.
Well, technically, we already had a slight biopic on Barack Obama. If people want to check it out, it's really cute. South Side with You, about how he met Michelle, and it's this cute little rom-com, and that's that I think. I mean, I'm more of a conservative, and I still enjoyed it. It doesn't matter; they're cute people, and so I recommend checking that out. But I mean, I think that this is kind of silly. I mean, anybody can prepare to maybe be asked if be ready if you are asked to play a part. But I think there's lots of people who could very adequately play Barack Obama in a biopic. And it depends on what age they're doing for him, or if they're trying to cover his whole life in a biopic. So I don't know. It would depend on the director a little bit, but sure. I'm not that familiar with Drake, to be honest.
Me neither, really. I know he was an actor in Degrassi, which I think was a Nick at Night show or something. I don't know.
No, I
Like
know.
making up.
I mean, I never watched it, but I know of Degrassi. I didn't realize he acted at all. I have no.
Yeah,
I thought he was just a singer. Because he's a singer, right?
he's a singer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
It's a choice.
I'm not as well versed in. I mean, I know country music pretty well, and I know Broadway pretty well, but I don't know hip hop and R&B and some of the other genres that well. So.
Sure. Sean, how about you?
This right here is an example of two gentlemen that are very good at what they do,
Mm-hmm.
or in one case did. Yeah, right now they both do not know what they're talking about. There's a couple of hints I have in here. First of all, Drake said, "I'm very good at impressions." Right there, you lose the role for me. Like, impressions are not acting. Sure, there could be a portion of it. There could be like a certain aspect of it, but just doing an impression doesn't make a good performance. Cate Blanchett, The Aviator, how you doing? And I just am bothered by that, because it is just one of those things that really bugs me, where if there's nothing else below the surface on this, then there's nothing else there. And then Barack Obama sort of mentions, what did he sort of say? You can do what you want. I mean, he's a talented brother. Comes when he's ready. And then, that just seems like this guy doesn't really know. When you're thinking about a movie, Drake doesn't exactly seem like the right fit. And he'll just say like, "Oh, I'd love to get portrayed by Drake. Are you kidding me? That sounds amazing. Anyone would do that." And it just shows how much I miss this dude with the little Malia and the Malia and Sasha moment at the end. It's just like such a cute little tag. This guy always did those little charmers. I will say that, Southside with You, I will also recommend it. It's a very good movie. I really loved that movie. There is also a Netflix movie called Barry.
That's right.
That was out. That wasn't as great. That was young Barack. And there is also another portrayal. And this one is the one I looked up to make sure I look at this actor very carefully. And it is in The Comey Rule, which was a Showtime 2-night miniseries where Brendan Gleeson played Trump, and it went from the election all the way until Comey gets fired. Kingsley Ben-Adir plays him for just a couple of scenes. Kingsley Ben-Adir is also going to be playing Malcolm X in the One Night in Miami movie coming out. It was a performance that was so well done, and here comes the hypocrisy from me. It was basically an impression, but there was a certain level of just well done, just moments in there, and just really kind of nailed it. So I always say this, and it's just boring when I say this, and nobody wants to hear it, but I say, let's get an unknown. Let's get an unknown to play Barack Obama. Let's get an unknown to play, any actor, and let's make them a star from it. Or it destroys their career because they, do a terrible job. Either one, but but get the unknown going there, because I really, I love our actor. I love our star-studded actors. Put them in really cool star-studded casts, but have the unknown for a part that's that big.
Yeah, I mean, literally anybody can say, "I'm getting ready. I'm ready for the call." I mean, that means nothing.
I will say, looking up Kingsley Ben-Adir, he does look like Barack Obama in a certain way. He has a look, but man, what two major players on the world stage to emanate in a movie! Kind of wild. So, Rachel, I'm very much well known for my transitions here to news stories. So, speaking of big on the world stage, Godzilla versus Kong. It's not confirmed, but it's likely heading to streaming. So the Hollywood Reporter had news last week that Godzilla vs. Kong was in the running to be the next big film that heads to one of our streaming services, with Netflix reportedly making an offer upwards of $200 million, which Warner Media blocked. And I'm not sure of all the details here, but they are preparing to make an offer to Legendary so that they can put it on HBO Max. My question here, and Sean, we'll start with you on this, is Godzilla versus Kong on a streaming service. Is that something that you're interested in seeing?
Well, here's the issue I have, is that I'm very interested in seeing Godzilla versus Kong, so I'll watch it anywhere. I'm just curious of when this movie was set to come out, and this shows that maybe there's going to be a lack of faith in theaters reopening as soon as some movies might think, or some studios might think. And so that gets me worried.
Twice. Yeah. Once it was going to come out in the spring, and then again and then it was delayed. It was going to come out in October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That gets tricky.
I do think they moved it to May of next year for another date change. I may be thinking of something different, but still, it's just kind of an interesting move, I think, for such a special effects heavy film. And Rachel, I don't know if this is a film that you would, be knocking on the door to watch, but is that something that you think would be at least, I don't know, worthwhile on a streaming service?
So I really disliked the last one. What was it? Yeah. What was it called? King of the Monsters or something?
King of the Monsters.
Yeah, Godzilla King of the Monsters.
That movie was terrible. Even the visual spectacle was disappointing to me. It was so rainy and cloudy. Mm-hmm. You couldn't, the way it was edited, it was hard to get involved in the spectacle of it, which is what you at least want. If the story's going to be terrible, which it was, you at least want there to be some spectacle entertainment to it. But I thought it was like a Transformers movie, and I came home, looked up a bunch of the editors, Transformers, who worked on Transformers visual effects. I'm like, okay, now it's all making sense. I just didn't like it at all, and I wasn't a big fan of Kong Skull Island. So this whole franchise is not really working for me. The first Godzilla was okay. And so I don't know. I'm kind of on it, but it does seem like a film that if they were made well, I'd want to see it on the big screen.
Yeah.
Because I just don't care about the franchise at all. I don't know, I'm like, whatever.
Drop it.
So if it goes to HBO Max, then it does seem like the fans who do like those movies will be disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting drop because I think that, aside from Wonder Woman, which also has some major CGI effects, but is not necessarily, the monster clash, it definitely is a different type of film to be pulled from theaters for a streaming service. So I would expect it's probably going to go to HBO Max. That's kind of where my money is. They must be wanting to make some money back on it for some reason at this point. Of course, a lot of studios are hurting with the fact that they haven't had any return in the past 8 months, 9 months. So,
and I think we have this talk every time, but we got to talk about the fact that this might be more about HBO Max than about a monster movie in the theaters versus the TV, because HBO Max is something that, first of all, took a while for them to get eyeballs on it. They have Wonder Woman coming up, so that's their big excitement set piece. They put an HBO show on there that nobody really was watching except for, I think, me, called Industry, which I absolutely love. And but they dumped they were doing weekly for the HBO. Then they put the rest of the season on there. Now I don't know if that was because HBO Max is going to turn into a dumping ground, or if that was because they want to get some interesting TV there, interesting content there. And so I think that this is something where there's a mix of two things going on. We got a pandemic. It's going to be really tough to get butts in seats of theaters. Even when things calm down, people are still going to be kind of worried. And also, it's let's get HBO Max on the table a little bit more. Let's get them involved more, and hopefully we'll get more eyes on HBO Max. So I don't know if that has something to do with it, and them trying to help a streaming service that isn't dying, but also isn't one of the leading ones, without a doubt.
That's true. I love the Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max.
So
they're so good. You didn't like them, Sean?
Oh, no, so great. Sorry. I shook my head while saying so great.
I thought they were so good. So that's been my favorite part. And it's nice to have Studio Ghibli all in one place.
Yeah,
that's great.
And they do have a deep catalog of films. I feel like the only problem with HBO Max is that the films that appear on there don't last on there long. Yeah. So even a lot of the ones they launched with, I know the DC catalog in particular, a lot of fans were excited about, and then
that was bonkers.
Yeah, right away.
And then they lose Harry Potter right away too.
That's the big one, yeah.
And Lego. I'm like, you lied.
They got you. It's going to be interesting to see how they continue to differentiate themselves, moving forward. Of course, the biggest thing with launching a platform like HBO Max or Peacock is that you've already licensed out a lot of your products to other streamers or have other agreements regarding the appearances of the films and shows on television, whether that's syndication or in the sense of HBO Max, you're talking about HBO, the streaming service as well. But that's all under the same umbrella, so I feel like it's gotta work that out a little bit. So we'll see where that goes. It's going to be an interesting winter, I believe, for films, because if we don't see the pandemic getting better, I think we're going to see a lot more. We say this every week, a lot more films going to streaming. So let's move on to another CGI controversy. I don't know if we can call it this. I didn't know it was one until someone sent me this article. But we got a little teaser for Clifford the Big Red Dog, the adored children's series. And people are saying that it's quote unquote scary as hell. This isn't Clifford. It's a dog covered in blood. And that's essentially that. But there's a lot of random comments about, those dogs next to him are his enemies and he's about to eat them, or things like that he just looks scary. I didn't think that at all. And Rachel, I'm wondering what
puppy. Like, it's so great. Oh, you're going to go to Rachel, but I just can't help it because he's a little puppy. I mean, if I saw him walking on the street, I wouldn't pet him. Like, but he's just a little puppy. Like, it's fine.
Well, he's a big puppy, but...
Oh, well, yeah, I guess he'll be big, yeah.
Rachel, what did you think about this? Did you see this kind of back and forth online?
So this is going to sound strange, but when I was little, one of my friends got attacked by a dog, and ever since then, I've always had issues with unfamiliar animals. And that bit of I don't know, phobia is too strong of a word, but like it takes me a while to like warm up to animals. And then once I do, I'm fine. And I'm always, of course, want them to be treated well, and but I'm just not a big animal person, and so the idea of a giant dog is just like not for me.
So that was not a regular children's book in Rachel's life.
No. And so I think the whole project is very misguided. I just don't understand who are they making this movie for? Who is going to be interested in the Clifford the Red Dog movie? I mean, the people that grew up on him, are kids still super into him? Maybe, maybe not. I have no idea. But the people who grew up on him aren't going to want to. It's kind of the same problem that Dora had, even though that ended up actually being a pretty fun movie. The ones who grew up with him, it's too kind of old. It's like too childish for them. And then the ones who are watching it now, are they going to like it? I don't know. They'll just watch their show. And so I feel like it's just a misbegotten project.
Yeah, it strikes me as yet another grab of a property that studios can quickly flip into a film directed towards children and just make short-term money. That's my initial reaction to this, but
like I would have made it cuter, because the thing about Paddington is he doesn't really look like a bear. He's cute and fluffy. Like if he looked like a bear and was all like, that would be terrifying. I wouldn't like it. So I think that you've got to make him a little more cartoony, a little bit more fluffy.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Sean, are we going to get a remake or a redo of this character like the fans that force Sonic?
I was just going to say this would be like the Sonic situation where, all of a sudden it looks way too realistic, which is what Sonic tried to do. It's like, we want to make this look real and proper. And then people are like, he's got teeth. You need to stop it. He's got human teeth and Sonic doesn't have human teeth. Please don't do this anymore. And so I think this may be the same kind of deal. Who knows how much they've done of this movie? I like to think of the idea of this. They have Sonic in mind and they're like, okay, let's just release the 2 seconds we have, and they release the 2 seconds they have and everyone goes, oh no, and they're like, okay, let's just make him an animated character in the real world like everybody wants, because they don't want realism in this kind of stuff. And that's true. You don't want to see like a dying sponge on land if you're going to SpongeBob here, or an actual person who like had nuclear experiments put on them when you're looking at Hey Arnold. No, you'd rather just see a lovely animated movie that's fun.
That's right. Yeah, I think that Lion King 2019 has ruined us all. It's ruined movies on so many levels.
Disney, what have you done?
We do not want realistic looking lions and whatever Pumbaa is. We don't want them singing and dancing, and that's just not, it doesn't work. It's bad.
And that's that on that. Now, it's so interesting. Like there's certain things that work when you try to make them more realistic or update the CGI or update, however you're going to present the property. But the Lion King was not it. And apparently Clifford isn't it. See, I'm not bothered by it. I'm like, all right, well, let's just see how it turns out. But it's just funny to me that that's where people are freaking out. Why I don't think we're going to see a change is because who's banging down the doors here? Like children who are reading the books, because they're probably fine with it. The only people I can think of are the parents who, will have a little sway on whether to take their kids there. If the line that's out there is that he looks like he's covered in blood, I'm sure the studio is going to think, oh, we need to back off this.
But do you agree? Who is this movie made for? What's going on?
I don't know.
It's made for the studios to make a boatload of money, and that's about it.
I feel like it's one of the every year we get a few kids movies that are just thrown out there as the good family film to go to see. But when you're starting off this way with a some negative press around the looks of it, that's not really how you want your family film that flies under the radar to go. It just makes me wonder when we get a full CGI Bernstein Bears movie, what that's going to look like moving forward. Oh man. So transition again. Here's the good one. Ready? I also wonder what the CGI is going to look like in the Toxic Avenger. Now, what's funny about this is I read up on the Toxic Avenger a lot a couple weeks ago because when I was doing research for a forthcoming podcast, I was looking at the superhero films of the 70s and 80s, and the Toxic Avenger rose to the top of that list as one that I had never heard of. So for those who aren't familiar, it's a dark superhero comedy that first hit the big screen in 1984, has spawned a number of sequels, but it has to do with a janitor who falls out a window. He's a bully janitor, and then he falls out a window into toxic waste, as one does. And it results in his transformation into the Dark Avenger, the Toxic Avenger, I'm sorry, who has superhuman size and strength. This is a very odd property to me and a very odd film, but I'm shocked that they grabbed Peter Dinklage to lead this up, because I do think that that's actually a really good grab for this role. Sean, are you familiar with the Toxic Avenger at all?
I am not actually. For some reason, when you say that phrase, it fires a few synapses in my brain, but I'm not sure. I've never seen any of the movies or seen any scenes from the movies. I look at this and I think about, just based on what you described, Dinklage is sort of a brilliant casting. He's been quiet for a few years, I believe. I think his last time he poked his head out of somewhere was for 3 Billboards, which was he had a great performance in that. And I think that he sort of fits a dark comedy style really well, and a character that might have to dramatically reckon with being a monster or covering their own demons and trying to be good really well. And I sort of love the idea of putting someone like this in, because first it's we're remaking Toxic Avenger. Everyone's who cares? It's they decided to remake RoboCop, and it's wait till you hear our lead, Joel Kinnaman. And it's oh, well, that doesn't really, do it for us. I love Joel, but that's not really going to be the one that gets people to the theater. And so I think this will be something where it's Dinklage, just based on the Thrones fans, he's bringing them. He's bringing them along to this movie. And whether it's a disappointment or not, this will be a lot more successful with him involved. And also, I think, better with him involved, knowing nothing about the movie at all. But,
So I don't know this property at all. Is the character a little person in the comics?
So not from my research. I may have missed that part, but that was a surprising piece to me. I wonder if that's a direction they want to go with Peter Dinklage, because it does transform the toxic waste transforms the character into someone with super size and strength. So, but going back to our CGI conversation, it just worries me what this is going to look like.
Let's hope they go practical. I mean,
well, yeah, because if they make him a normal height, average height, that would be awkward. I feel like that would be weird. Because he should be able to be a superhero just the way that he is, not needing to be of average height. And he's a talented actor, so sure, why not? I'm not one of those people that turns up their nose at superhero movies and thinks they're not cinema. I think that's so stupid. But I'm not that familiar, obviously, with this character. And it's not DC or Marvel, right? It's its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
sure, why not?
It's a spoof. It's a spoof-ish kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like the dark take on all the superhero films that were coming out at that time, but he's tagged as in the original story as a 98-pound weakling who works as a janitor at a health club.
I mean, I'm still trying to forget his role in Pixels, but but I know that and I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones. That's not for me. Yeah, but I know he can be very talented. So
okay,
sure,
it's gonna be. Hey, who knows? I mean, I just don't know if there's room for it right now, because of you kind of have Deadpool and them doing the R-rated crazy stuff. But who knows? I've been shocked in the past. apparently there once was an avenue for four or five of these films. So, all right, let's move on to the last big story. I want to talk about this film, Bullet Train, and we've mentioned it here and there in the past, but the reason I want to talk about it is because every week this cast grows with great casting, by the way, not just kind of some background actors, but we just learned that I'm going to butcher the name, so I apologize, but Hiroyuki Sanada, who was in Westworld, is in the upcoming Army of the Dead, which is Zack Snyder's film coming to Netflix next year. He's joined the adaptation of this graphic novel that is about essentially assassins on a train. Immediately makes me think of Snowpiercer in a way. But Brad Pitt is tapped to star, and he is joined by Michael Shannon, Joey King, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Lady Gaga, Logan Lerman, Brian Tyree Henry, and Zazie Beetz, as well as some others. That is a loaded cast. Rachel, do you know anything about Bullet Train?
I do not know anything about it. But I mean, that sounds about like it's not only that it's a loaded cast, it sounds really eclectic.
Yeah.
Like people from all over the place. So that's interesting. I always love to see what Michael Shannon's doing next. He's done some really weird stuff. So I love Logan Lerman. I think he's great. So in Lady Gaga, I love Star Born. So there's a lot of people that have done really interesting stuff in there. And I wonder, do we know who the director is?
The director is, sorry, I was just looking up it's going to be David Leitch.
David.
He has done Atomic Blonde, Deadpool 2, Hobbs and Shaw, John Wick. And this actually might make a little bit more sense when I tell you a little bit more about what it's based on. But it is based on a book called Maria Beetle. And it centers on a group of hitmen and assassins with conflicting motives on a train in Tokyo, which actually I could see working out. It reminds me of a few other films.
It's surprising there's only one Japanese person in this list.
Yeah.
That's a little strange.
I wonder if they'll relocate it, kind of how some other films have done, and move it to, New York or something.
Yeah, probably.
Sean,
that wouldn't make any sense. It's like the one train in Tokyo that's full of old expats. Like what?
Sean, your thoughts?
I love the idea of it, just being like the lame bullet train that goes from, wherever, like, an Excella that goes from like Connecticut to Pennsylvania. Obviously, I just thought of those two. But it's just like, and then like there's like a couple of businessmen there. Like Michael Shannon's just like a stockbroker trying to make it like, on a business expense. And then like, I don't know, gets stabbed by Brian Tyree Henry. Like, it just seems like that's the kind of like great like dynamic we're looking for. I love the, like, maybe a setting of like, a suburban like commuter just train that is just people trying to get to work. But with this, I always get wary of an amazing cast. I'm one of those just like absolute like loser cynics that when I see a large cast, I do kind of, I widen my eyes and for a second I get excited and I smile and then I'm like, uh-oh, what if this like turns into like a little bit too much? Like it gets too big for its britches. And that's the one thing. It's like, oh, there's going to be a ton of assassins going at it with each other. And so, what is this going to look like? I think I want to like see it further go. I am loving the director. The director of this is just going to be like, let's make a fun, silly action movie. And so already it's like, I'm in. I'm not going to take this seriously, although it's still going to be good. And so that's the important balance that gets a little bit tricky.
There you go. I mean, it's something that's right up my alley, to be quite honest. I love a good action film here and there. So I'll definitely see this. I'm also very interested to see Lady Gaga in a more action-oriented role. Because just thinking back to like A Star is Born, and then also with, I'm thinking back to American Horror Story, where there wasn't much going on for her. Her role was kind of calmer. Should be interesting.
Well, it's always so interesting. These people, after they get their Oscar, I swear it's always like, okay, I'm gonna. They are like, finally, I get to do like the B horror movie or the action movie or the whatever that they've been dying to do. They've been doing all these Oscar baiting movies for years, trying to get that, an Oscar.
This is
And then it's
a
like
classic Jean Dujardin, the artist.
Yeah, all of them. I mean,
And
Halle
then the
Berry,
Monuments
hello.
Men. Or Halle
Yeah.
Berry. Yes.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I guess
Yeah.
Brad, is he going to be our next Liam Neeson? Doing all these action movies? I don't know.
All the
God
action
help us,
movies
though.
that are kind of similar, but
He's got to age 40 more years.
I enjoyed Honest Thief. It was typical Liam Neeson, but it was a good movie. You just reminded me when we were talking about Michael Shannon doing weird films as well. I did watch one other film this week with Michael Shannon in it called Echo Boomers. It also had Alex Pettyfer and Patrick Schwarzenegger. Rachel, did you see this?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I was like, oh no, she saw this and probably loved it because I'm about to say not great things about it. It's not a terrible film. It's kind of millennials that are disillusioned with society and the fact that the rich are able to live the lives that they do while the millennials are burdened with student debt and all of that and can't get jobs. And so they basically work with a insurance broker and get readouts of what has been insured at some of these homes, break in to steal those items and resell them. It's very interesting. I actually enjoyed it. It was kind of just one of those movies where it ends and you're like, all right, which I'm okay with, especially this year.
If you want to see, I don't know why this made me think of it, just Michael Shannon. If you want to see a legendary, so bad it's good movie, there's a movie on Netflix called Pottersville that is so insane. You've got to see it. It's about, he plays this like small town, Michael Shannon plays this small town guy who he starts dressing up like, his wife becomes super into the furries, and then he starts dressing up as Bigfoot, and then like the news finds him, and then they do this story on Bigfoot, and the whole thing has all these allusions to It's a Wonderful Life throughout the whole thing, which because of Pottersville, and there's all these sort of allusions to It's a Wonderful Life. It's so bonkers. It has Ron Perlman's in it. It's got Christina Hendricks in it. It is Judy Greer's in it. It's insane.
Oh my gosh.
It's,
Sean, have you seen this?
I have seen the poster and I'm like, is this an It's a Wonderful Life sequel? Is that Mr. Potter is like a young man? Is this a prequel then? Like, what's going on here? So now that I know the plot, I think I'm gonna miss it, but we'll see. Maybe I'll check it out.
Because, like, in my opinion, so bad it's good movies only work if they are completely sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're trying to be a bad movie, then it's no fun. So something like Sharknado, lame. But something like this, where they do have some where they're trying to be a comedy, but this is actually trying to be super sincere, and this like be kind to the furries and be a community. And it's so
the morals of every Christmas movie: be kind to the furries.
What is
Rachel,
happening?
I just pulled up your review for it on Rotten Tomatoes, and your line is, I just don't know what to say or how to adequately describe this film. 1 out of 10.
Boom.
That's right. Yes. So
I'll put that on the list somewhere near the bottom.
it would be a great one I am not going to encourage alcohol. I don't drink alcohol myself, but if I did, this would be a good one to watch.
That's on the list. All right. So let's, we talked about It's a Wonderful Life in that little weird conversation about this strange film. But let's move on to talking about our top topic, if you will. And this is really about the rom-coms. And one of the reasons we want to bring this up is because we on this podcast have been having discussions around what the future of the movie industry is going to look like. And I do think it came up, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Sean Chandler was on a few weeks ago, I think he did mention as well that we were talking about B movies and if there's going to be a market in theaters for them when theaters come back, or if it's going to be more of those big blockbusters that we're really going to be focused on when we get back into theaters. Otherwise, we'll probably see a lot of these films trickle into streamers and things like that. But before we get there, and the reason I want to have the conversation tonight is because Rachel is much more, well versed in this than I think either of us are. But Rachel, back up a little bit and tell us how Hallmarkies came to be.
Yeah, so I have Rachel's Reviews in my YouTube channel, and my friend Amber came on there. We were covering Anne with an E because I love Anne of Green Gables, and we both hated it. We thought it was garbage. And so we're like, what could we cover that would be fun and that would get this bad taste out of our mouth that we didn't like? So we realized that we both loved Hallmark Christmas movies. And so we did an episode on my channel called the Top 12 for Christmas in July, Top 12 Hallmark Christmas movies. And people really loved it, and it really took off. And so we started on my channel to do these Hallmarkies podcast episodes. And we did a couple, and they were doing really well. So we're like, so we decided to spin it off. This was in 2017. So we decided to spin it off. And so we did our first interview with a writer named Nina Weinman in, I think, October of that year. And then in December, we interviewed Paul Campbell, who's an actor that does a bunch of Hallmark movies. And he was delightful. He was so nice. And I think that between those two things and then our Christmas coverage that year, it kind of got the ball rolling, and it just took off. And now Amber's kind of stepped away for now, but I have a group of co-hosts, and we cover all of the Hallmark content, whether television shows, doing the recaps on shows like When Calls the Heart and The Good Witch and things like that. And then we also we cover all of the Hallmark films throughout the year, and then come to and occasionally we'll do bonuses on Lifetime and the other networks. And then during the holidays, we cover as many Christmas movies as we can, whether on Hallmark or on the other networks. And so it's pretty exciting. This is now my 4th season to cover, and we just got through the biggest hurdle, the biggest marathon of their Thanksgiving week coverage, which they have a new movie every single day. And it's just, they have to be given a huge props this year. Unbelievable. The fact that they could pull off 40 movies in a pandemic, and not just that they did it, but this has been their best season by far that I've covered, not even close. And so the fact that, and the most diverse, and so the fact that they did all that is just amazing.
Yeah.
And so if you like light rom-coms, then you'll enjoy most of them. Some of them are terrible, and we talk about those on the podcast. We're not a gush podcast. We talk about ones we like. We talk about ones we don't like. And you saw it. You were on it. You saw that we did both, and we talked honestly about our opinions, and that's something I'm very proud of. And I love it. I think it's funny. I think it's something, even if you didn't watch, my goal is to, even if you didn't watch any of the movies, you could still listen to the podcast and have a good laugh and enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that definitely comes through as some of the episodes I've listened to, and even being on it. I think you do a great job, Rachel, of summarizing the films without giving it all away. And it's so funny with the two that we covered that night. One of them I think we both very much enjoyed, and the other one I don't know that we really did.
No.
But how do you find time for all these? Because I think you mentioned before we got on that you're at 60 of them, 60 films.
Yes. So I've watched 60 Christmas movies this year, 64 for the one I watched tonight, 64 Christmas movies. And first of all, these are not feature-length films. So they're like an hour and 20 minutes, right? So I get more credit than I deserve. But also, I work from home. I have pretty much most of my career. And so I'm able to have one of these on. They're not like high intellect films. And so I can have them on when I'm doing other things and I can watch. And there's some days when I'll watch 6, 7, 8. Boom, 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 boom. And the only thing that's kind of jarring is that it's also award season now. So I'm flipping back and forth between these Hallmark movies and something like Pieces of a Woman, or like
Two very different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Not a Hallmark movie right there.
No, our Hillbilly Elegy, and then watching the latest Candace Cameron Bure film. So it's kind of a weird life that I have, but I'm glad that I could do. So I watch Promising Young Woman, where and then the
Not a
next I'm
Hallmark
watching and then the next I'm watching Melissa Joan Hart and Jason Priestley. Christmas romance. So I think I have a pretty good life. I think it's a good one.
There you go. That's a balance.
Yeah. And I'm
Oh my
very
God.
fortunate because for my main job, because this is just I'm a freelancer, and so I just all these gigs and all the stuff all come together. But for my main job, I am a blogger and social media editor for a company called Kobayashi America, and they pretty much allow me to work at my own schedule, which is incredible. And so I just make sure I have the blogs done for them, and so I'm very fortunate in that way. So
Yeah,
it works out.
that's great. Sean, have you been one to watch any Hallmark films?
Not a single one, probably. And honestly, like it's very tough for me because, like, as a critic, I want to literally make sure I don't give a movie an F, and I want to make sure that I give it like a D, C, B, or even an A. I want to make sure like the lowest of the low movies still like I can find something there to salvage. I have not gotten into the Hallmark movies, whether they are, the upper scale ones or the ones you can watch while ironing. And so I don't exactly know, how to navigate this, let's call it a genre. It just gets a little bit tricky for me. Because it does feel like pretty much a whole nother world for me. And, I'm someone that really, and this was, there was some sort of survey I did one time or a questionnaire I did where it said, what's your least favorite genre? And I was like, I'm not picking a least favorite genre. I really don't have one. I have genres that I wish had better movies going on, the genre we're going to be talking about today. But I love a lot of movies from that genre as well. And so, when I look at something like the Hallmark movies, my problem is that I don't know if it's that they're not underneath my algorithm. They don't pass by my eyes. Maybe I'm closing my eyes every time they do. But it's just something that, when I come home and, Sam is watching, I don't think this is a Hallmark movie, so pardon the offense if there's any, but, something like The Christmas Drop or whatever it's called. And so, I just said, she looked at me and said, this is terrible. And I said, okay, then I'm out on that. And so
You did watch Holiday though.
I did watch Holiday. But that do these count as Hallmark movie?
No.
Does this count as a Hallmark?
So
Okay,
Holiday
good.
is very R-rated, but Operation Christmas Drop is similar. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And so there's a few things that might not be in a Hallmark movie, but I enjoyed it. I actually thought it was sweet. But the thing that they've done so brilliantly with Hallmark is they recognize that Hollywood stopped making rom-coms. They just did. And so you'll get the teen rom-coms on Netflix. Now they're trying to kind of catch up to Hallmark's game, but it is pretty rare that you get a rom-com in the theaters. Very rare. I mean, that's why everyone was so excited about Crazy Rich Asians, because it was like, whoa, there's a romantic comedy. And I think in general, not that all women like the same things and that all women like Hallmark movies. I know that's not true, of course, but in general, Hollywood stopped making movies for women. And we're most concerned with making movies for 13 to 20-year-old young men. And so you had this whole group, including myself, who loves romantic comedies and thinks that it can be a great genre, with nowhere to go, with no movies. And so what do? And the ones that were made were very crass and vulgar. So they were sort of the Judd Apatow variety of romantic comedy, which is not my thing. And I don't, for the most part, enjoy those kind of romantic comedies. And so all these people with similar tastes, some of them men, but mostly women, they had nowhere to go. And then Hallmark was like, here, come to us. And we did. And I think that most people, even if they don't enjoy them, I think most of them be like, it's fine. It's harmless. I can see why it's your thing, not my thing. But there's bad ones, and I get it. But as a whole, the genre, I can't imagine people like getting all upset about it. That they're just sweet little movies about people falling in love. And some people are like, oh, well, they're not feminist. I'm like, yes, they are. They're all the there's bad ones, there's good ones, but the good ones are about a woman who is usually a person of business who is motivated and has a lead in the role. Most Hollywood movies do not have a lead female character, and as a backside, you have most of these written by women. You have them produced by women, and so it's just an interesting a little nugget of little section of movie making. Most of them are made up in Vancouver, and they make about this year they're going to make about 115, I think, movies total. So
this just feels like to me at this point, and this might be a wildly unfair comparison.
Yeah.
But are the Hallmark movies like the holiday version of Blumhouse, where they just are just making like, lots and lots of stuff, and you're just kind of seeing what sticks? They'll get a couple of successes and then a couple of duds, or a lot of duds.
I think that's fair comparison. I think for the most part, most of the movies that they make, their audience likes. Okay. And
they know who their audience is.
Yeah.
Different from Blumhouse.
This year, I've liked most of the Hallmark movies. Let me see. I have liked, like I said, this has been a very good year for them. I've liked about where is it? Sorry. Their Christmas movies, they've had 27 that have been released so far. I have given 3 crowns or above to 23 of them. So that's pretty good.
Nice.
There you go. Yeah, that's a really good number.
Pretty good.
So you sort of mentioned like the key to their success. But what makes them I'm now just fascinated by this entire world that I don't know. Yeah. But what sort of could save like a Hallmark movie? Like thinking about it, I'm just wondering, does it help that pretty much they're all rocking the Christmas thing? And so that sort of like, even when a bad movie's around, you at least got that Christmas, sort of like that Christmas motivation. What's the word? Momentum. The Christmas momentum.
It absolutely does. In fact, there was a movie this fall that I can't remember the name of it, but that was about this general store that's going out of business. And that's a common trope. And and I was saying to my friends, I said, if this was about a Christmas store, I would be way more affable about it. But something like fall, it's just not doing it for me. And but yeah, there is something about Christmas that is especially just, I don't know, it's so cheerful and a hopeful, happy time. And that I think makes it really fun. But I think that what saves some of the bad ones is that if they have this stable of actors that they work with again and again, you feel sort of it's kind of like Sandra Bullock, like we bonded with her sometime in like the early 2000s, we bonded with her. And so she could put out almost any movie. J-Lo, probably similar. She could put out almost any terrible romantic comedy. And we'd be like, you're so sweet. We love you. And so I think that they do that where they have these ones and you see them and the movie may not be perfect, but you really like these people. And I mean, it's especially tricky me where I've actually like interviewed a lot of these people. And so I have to like put on my objective critic hat. Because I know these people, at least I feel like I know them. And so that is one, I think, a big way. And if in any romantic comedy, whether it's Hallmark or not, if the leads have chemistry, that is huge. And you can have something on paper that feels like this should work. This should be so fun. And they don't have chemistry. And then it just sits there like a lie. And so it doesn't work. And I think that that's the biggest key is and it's so hard because that's such an intangible. You can have everything on paper. It seems like these people should have chemistry and they don't. And you can have people that's a weird combination, but it totally works. And I love it. And it was so good. I mean, they can be somewhat magical. Like this year, there was one about starring Ryan Pavey, who is a lot of them are soaps guys, and he was on soap operas for a while. And anyway, he plays a man who comes forward in time from like I don't know where it was. It was like 100 years ago or whatever. And he meets Erin Cahill, who's sweet and wonderful, and is the tour guide for his mansion. And he's like, "What are you doing in my house?" And she's like, "What?" Anyway, it was really fun. I loved it. It was great.
That reminds me. I don't know why I thought of this immediately, but sort of similar to what we were talking about with rom-coms and Christmas. A Netflix film last year, or wasn't there like a night that?
Oh yeah.
A Night Before Christmas, I think it was called.
Mm-hmm.
I actually enjoyed that movie.
I wish they had. It was fine, but I wish they had leaned more into the humor. I thought it could have been funnier the night before, because the Switched Again movies, the Princess Switch and now Princess Switch 2, Switched Again, hilarious, absolutely. Yeah, so that's out this year. Princess Switch 2 is Switched Again, and Vanessa Hudgens plays. So there's already the two that look alike that were from the first movie, right? There's the princess and then the commoner or whatever. And then now they have a third, her cousin, who is right out of Cruella de Vil. Hilarious. She might as well have one of those long cigarettes or whatever that Cruella has. It's just like, darling, it's so funny.
So here's my question with all this. Do we think that there will now be an opening for more rom-coms to be produced? And the reason I ask that, theatrical rom-coms. And the reason I ask that is because we're at a time where theaters are going to, studios in general as well, are going to want to be producing things that get people back to the theaters so that the theater market reinvigorates and it ultimately gets back to being somewhat lucrative, even though I would argue it was on the downward slope as it was and needs to kind of rework itself a little bit. But are we at a point where we might start getting more rom-coms back, do you think, Rachel? Or are we just going to continue down this trend of seeing them more as made-for-TV films?
We might, but I kind of feel like a lot of people probably say, if I can stay home and watch a Hallmark movie, why should I go to the theater?
Yeah.
And for that same basic thing. And so that's why you end up getting like the Bad Moms or something that's kind of raunchier, or something that's that like is sort of another demographic. Because again, why would you go to the theater when you can just watch it on Hallmark? And I mean, I think that's why it's hard to get new Christmas movies that aren't super raunchy or super, something different that Hallmark's not providing. And I mean, I think the studios, I can tell you for sure, I think if the studios want things to get back on their feet, they need to start making content for women that are going to get women back in the theater. And whether that's a rom-com, whether it's an action movie, whether it's, whatever it might be. I mean, the fact that it's kind of sad that our Black Widow and Wonder Woman, female-led superhero movies, that they're the ones that got paid the price for 2020 more than anything else. And so they have to win over the women and get them going back to the movies, get their families, taking their families back to the movies, feel safe. And I think that if they're able to do that and able to happen to say the crowd that all went and saw Greatest Showman many times, I saw it 4 times.
I did too.
With my friends.
I love that movie.
Went to the sing-along. It was so fun. And I had a great time. You got to tap into that crowd and make movies that they are going to like. And I think that that's the key. And whether that's romantic comedies or other things, I think it's really important.
So, Sean, I think it's fair to say that rom-coms are not at the top of your list for genres that you're going to be watching. But are there any that stick out to you that you've seen that you are particularly fond of?
I mean, unfortunately, I'm going to be very unfair and just go with the classics. And this is what I say about rom-coms: is when they're on, and they are, I mean, pitch perfect. And I'm talking about, When Harry Met Sally. Then I'm going to the Hanks and Ryan twice, not counting Joe versus the Volcano. But I'm going for Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail. When you really think about when you think about that holy trinity of romantic comedy, you really think about just some of the best. Then you get into some very interesting ones, like Could You Call My Best Friend's Wedding a romantic comedy? I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of a sexual tension there, but that's about it. And so, it doesn't really come about there. But that is also an exceptional movie. But when it comes to the romantic comedy, I think it needs to have that good balance of romance and comedy. Rachel, you were talking about the Judd Apatow movies. I don't think any of those are romances. I don't think Knocked Up is a romantic comedy. I don't think Knocked Up is a romantic comedy. I don't think Forgetting Sarah Marshall is a romantic comedy. Sure, they end with the guy getting the girl or the girl getting the guy. But I just feel like those are ones that a lot of people just went to for laughter. They didn't go there for fulfillment in seeing a healthy relationship or a challenging sort of two people falling in love. Like no one's just
years, that was as close as we got. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
For the most part.
Yeah, they pass it off as that, and I just I worry about that because I love those movies, and I think that I'm a theater person that says that every single movie should be seen in the movie theater. But I think before even the pandemic hit, one of the main issues was that, people were just like, oh, you have to see this in the theater. They never said that about a romantic comedy. Now, Crazy Rich Asians was awesome. And a lot of people saw it. And because it demanded to be seen because, it started to become a cultural zeitgeist sort of situation. That's, I guess, if we're looking at a modern one, Crazy Rich Asians is another romantic comedy that I just really loved because it checked a lot of the boxes of the typical romantic comedy, and that's what really made it kind of wonderful, while being something that felt a little bit more modern than usual. But people needed to see it in the theater because they needed to see it. They didn't need to see it in the theater, according to the general public. Once again, every single movie should be seen in the theater. It's the theater is the place to see a movie, but don't see it right now because it's not safe to go to a theater. But every single theater, But anyway. And so I think, when we look at
you just took yourself off track there.
Yeah, I know. I totally did. I got a little bit worried that I was advocating for theater usage right now, and that was dangerous, and I didn't want to go there. But if we look at the movies that got pushed back for the theater, and we look at the movies that just went to a streaming site, the rom-coms went to streaming. And then the action movies, the main epic movies, the sci-fi movies got pushed back, with the exception of a couple like Wonder Woman 1984 and Kong vs. Godzilla, if that is going to end up on HBO Max. And so that worries me about the rom-com because I think that's something that should be enjoyed. I mean, I look at The Greatest Showman, what's going to happen with another movie that's going to be an original musical, which will be, let's face it, better than most adaptations of musicals going on right now. And where is that going to end up? And I think that something like that is also, Greatest Showman is a movie that demands to be seen in theaters because of the rousing music and the intensity that goes on there. And so I think that's there. And so I sort of trailed off on my worry about the theater industry, but I worry most about not just romantic comedies, but comedies in general. No one's going to see The King of Staten Island in a movie theater now. Because, you don't need to, and you don't need to. And hopefully, when we end up going back to theaters, it's not a risk, but no one needs to risk that. No one would have seen The King of Staten Island in the theater beforehand, which, all due respect, I love King of Staten Island, but those are some of the issues that we have is that the theater is a necessity to see an action movie with big boom boom sounds. And that seems to be it, which, hey, it's great in the theater, but that's my main issue.
I think the key is how you pivot, because the other thing about once we are back, I mean, I have actually frequented my theater quite a bit, but I've done it in a very safe way. But once we're pivoted, the thing that you've got to sell the movie going experience on is as an experience, as a form of entertainment. Mm-hmm. So that what better to go on a date with than to go to see a romantic comedy. And so I think that's how you have to kind of pivot. You want to go out with your girl, you want to go out with your husband, your partner, whatever, make a date night, go to the movies. And so you've got to make the movie going experience very palatable. And whereas a lot of times before the pandemic, it can be kind of unpleasant. People are taking out their phones, people are talking, It's super cold in the theater a lot of times. At least I don't know what I mean. I'm like freezing, and you got to have good food options. All that stuff is stuff that they've been dealing with. But I think maybe you have like a couple discount price. All that stuff they've got to work on. It's a huge problem. I don't know how it's going to be solved. Yeah. It's pretty depressing when I start to think about it. But the romantic comedy genre, I think, is challenging because it so much gets included into that genre that even the classics, like I've always said, I don't think that Sleepless in Seattle is a romantic comedy. It is not a comedy. Sure, it has a few comedic parts, but it's for the most part a movie about grief and dealing with loss. And it's not a comedy.
True.
I don't think Breakfast at Tiffany's is a comedy. It has a few funny parts. I get that. But for the most part, it's about a girl coming to her own and figuring out that she wants to be in this relationship, and him the same way. It's not really a comedy. And so it's a hard genre because it is kind of nebulous in what makes up a romantic comedy. And people include La La Land as a romantic comedy. It is not a romantic comedy.
Oh my God.
It's not even really romance. I mean, hello. And not that you can't have a romantic comedy end with them not being together. I'm fine with that. But I don't know. I think that's what makes it sort of a tricky genre. And so much of it is dependent on the script and whether you have that witty banter that's appealing. And then also whether you have the chemistry between the two leads. But it's hard. I mean, I sent you, Joe, my piece that I did on Is the Romantic Comedy Dead? And that was 6 years ago on my channel.
Yeah.
And the thing I think about romantic comedies is people are like, oh, they're so cheesy, they're so unrealistic. And I'm like, no, they're not. If you sit down and talk to almost any couple and you ask them to tell me your story, tell me how you met, it's a romantic comedy. It's like romance is just, is inherently kind of corny and cheesy.
Silly, yeah.
It's part of our lives. Almost everybody has some variation of a meet cute where they met their significant other, and how did they meet, and how did you end up going out, and what was your story? And so I think that it's a genre that, because there were so many bad ones for so long, and I think that it kind of made people feel that way, when in reality I think it's a really important genre that can be a way of talking about this important thing called love that's part of all of our lives.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And with everything that both of you have said, it's so interesting sitting back and thinking about the films I would classify as rom-coms that have come out in the past few years and who they've been oriented to. I think that the theatrical rom-com has really steered towards a teenager, the teenage age, if you will, that market, aside from the Judd Apatow films that are, the raunchier and trying to get a good like date night out of, people that want that type of, oh my gosh, comedy. But I think about a film like The Broken Hearts Gallery that went to VOD. And I think that's a film that actually would have done rather well as a rom-com in theaters because it was well reviewed. And I do think with the cast that was in it, it's definitely skewing towards the teenagers. I actually really was surprised by how much I enjoyed that movie. It was a nice breath of fresh air. But then I think of some others from past years, and one that has always stuck out with me is also about grief and, a disability in a sense, but 50 First Dates is another romantic comedy that I think walks a really fine line, but does it really well and actually has a great performance from both Adam Sandler and oh my gosh, Drew Barrymore. Thank you. Slipping. The worst part, Rachel, on these podcasts is when I start talking about actors. I'm like, oh no, I can't remember the name.
Drew Barrymore is very unknown. Don't worry about it, buddy.
Yeah.
I tell you one that should have done much better, that is such a great romantic comedy, is the movie Sing Street. With incredible music, incredible story. It's so sweet, and it is teenagers, but it's one that the relationship between the lead and his brother is so well done. I loved that, and it's just such a heartwarming, wonderful movie. And it's so frustrating that think it's Lionsgate or whatever studio, just totally dropped the ball in that movie. That movie should have done way better, and it should certainly have had way better Oscar campaign. I still am upset that the Chair movie got nominated. The song about the chair got nominated over Driving Like You Stole It. Like, what?
Wait, the song about the chair.
Yeah, there was this song by Sting about a chair, and that got nominated. Like,
man.
fine, you nominate the Moana and the La La Land songs. I get that. I have no problem with that. But the chair song, it'll always.
Drive It Like You Stole It is a banger. That's it. Like, you know,
So good.
It's so good.
Ugh, it should have been nominated and it should have won.
I will die on this hill.
I will. Absolutely.
Well, let's wrap up this conversation with just saying that when you search for a list of rom-coms, one of them that comes up is the Brendan Fraser film, George of the Jungle. So they do have issues in classifying these films.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
So before we wrap up for the evening, I do want to talk about real quick just what's coming out this week. We'll run through the list quickly. All My Life, Nomadland, and Black Bear are hitting limited theaters on Friday. Rachel, did you see Black Bear with Aubrey Plaza?
I did not.
Okay.
I've seen Nomadland. I haven't seen Black Bear.
I'm waiting to see some reviews on Black Bear because it's it's like a tale of two movies when you watch that. And it's, I don't know, it really got me. Godmothered is another film that's coming out on Disney Plus on Friday. Our guest last week, Brando Critic, was able to interview the cast, and it's actually a really nice interview to check out. So go check that out on his page. Half Brothers, which I talked about earlier, hits limited theaters on Friday. Mank hits Netflix on Friday, which I completely forgot that was coming out on Friday. And then Sound of Metal, a film that I talked about a few weeks ago, hits Amazon Prime Video on Friday, finally. Rachel, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes, and also at the Hallmarkies Podcast. We also have interviews of all kinds of talent, and so if you are interested in any of that, check it out. It's really fun.
Excellent. And once again, thank you so much for being here. It's so nice, I think, for us to like take a different conversational path in our podcast, because we always, when we just focus on news, we end up getting stuck in like, what superhero film is Marvel developing now?
Anytime.
Yeah, it's Sean and I really aim to bring conversations that we have kind of through text messages or offline into this, and we always want more input. So, Sean, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Math Teacher Movies. And also I am on a podcast called the Silver Screen Podcast, which is, on HudsonRiverRadio.com, live at 6 on Thursdays. And then it's a podcast the very next day.
Excellent. And you can listen to this podcast live every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcast the next morning at 7 a.m. That was Wednesday. And we want to encourage you all to please wear your mask when you are out and about. It is the least that we can do, and hopefully we can get back to some sort of normal. Rachel, Sean, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.